Hey, Lorie, thank you very much for
Hey.
joining me today. Really happy to be speaking to you. Um, First off, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Lorie Whitaker. I am the staff researcher here at GitLab. So I work on enablement and parts of ops, verify and release as parts of ops. So those are my areas of purview here. And I've been here just over a year. I joined last June, so it's August now. a year and a month.
Nice. So you've got a lot of
Yeah.
experience in GitLab years then. But it's like
Yes, that's
it's
what I
like
get
dog
told.
years. Dog years is you times it by 7 or something like
Totally,
that.
totally. Yes.
Lovely. So I've been talking with a lot of people around iteration as our value, and I'm really interested to learn from a researcher and get your perspective on basically how does iteration shape research or user research at GitLab.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this all weekend because I saw the questions in the invite, and I my first reaction is iteration and research are at odds. But then I started thinking about it more, and it's like, no, that's not really true. They're not always at odds. Research demands decisions to be made, so you can go and figure out how you're going to get answers to the questions that you need to get answers to. The process of creating questions and hypothesis and recruiting and actually running the sessions demands that iterations stop at some point, because you have to have a point where all parties agree that these are the things that we want to get answers to, and this is how we're going to go and get those answers. If you change those questions, you change that approach during that process, it adds on time, and often there's no more time to add on to things. So that's kind of where my gut comes from, telling me that they're kind of opposed, but it doesn't mean that research can't work in an iterative fashion. So what tends to happen sometimes is we in corporate world, we don't do like longitudinal research. We don't have like 6 months to go and talk to people and ask them questions. We have like a week to go and perform research. And so what happens when the value of iteration gets involved is research becomes shorter and quicker and more targeted. So instead of longitudinal, like, let's go find out how people go and shop for groceries online now, that might take 6 weeks, this turns into being, how do people search for and purchase meat online? That's a very specific question, very focused thing to go and find out data on. And you can do that in a relatively short amount of time. You still need to find people to talk to. And then that data can go into that iteration cycle and say, okay, that can inform, okay, people look for meat this way. Now, what's our next question? And does that data change that next question? And that's really where research can feed into that iterative cycle, is to provide feedback, provide confidence, provide answers to product and design. And so then they can change or have confidence in going in the direction that they had chose to do in the first place.
Right. So a lot of the time in the context of our product development workflow, we tend to scope down the size of our research projects in order to fit in and have the right timelines and everything.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
research also requires some of the bigger studies to understand a little bit of the broader context sometimes.
Mhm.
And I wonder whether you can speak to how you might strike a balance, or how might you find a balance when it comes to knowing when to do smaller things for iteration
Mhm.
and know when to go a little bit larger.
Yeah. So the smaller things are really useful for tactical questions. Should it put this button here? Should it be named this thing? Is this even the flow that we want to provide somebody to do this task? We know that this task is something they need to do. Strategic research is where you start to question, is that even the task that they should be doing? Is this even the product that they should be using? Do we even have a function that does that for them? That's where you back up and you go higher and you look broader over what's going on. Now, that research does take longer, but what you get out of it isn't just one answer. You're going to get 10 answers, a dozen answers or more. And all of those things will inform directions, which will then result in the tactical research of, do I put the button there? Do I have this function, go through this process this way with this feature or function? But it's the strategic piece that is at a higher level, higher view. And often it comes into play at GitLab when people are starting to say, we have a problem over here. We the numbers aren't right. There's not enough customers. We think it's this, but we're not sure. Research, go and find out. And usually when it's this thing that they think it is, even that thing is a strategic thing. Maybe it's how we position ourselves in the market. Maybe it's how we're sitting down and telling potential customers why they should use us. That's not just one answer. It's not like make a better deck. That's going to be a more strategic answer, even from the research team, to provide people.
Nice. And is there any experience where you've had at GitLab where you're conducting some more of the strategic research and found that iteration may provide value in areas that you didn't realize?
We're young in our strategic research possibilities. Our team is small. We have a lot of tactical research needs that need to be supported and conducted. But part of my weekend work was working through some of the CI adoption stakeholder interview piece. So the question has come up, what is CI adoption? And you ask everybody's got a different answer, which is great, but that means you're going to need to do some strategic research to really understand what adoption means to us, what adoption means to customers. And the true question we've been asked to find the answer to is, what is stopping people from adopting CI and then going further in the product? But the first step is to answer, what is adoption? And then the second pieces are like, what are the barriers? Who is that affecting? Because it's not affecting everybody at the same way. So we're just now starting to dive into more of that truly generative strategic research at a higher level here at GitLab.
Nice. And obviously research happens in the context of a product design, product manager, like a full team with engineers as well. And we call that sort of our product development workflow when everyone's working together.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how you see research and whether research can be used to help aid iteration in our product development workflow.
Oh yeah, I've seen it already. It's definitely more still at a tactical point, because again, they don't have the luxury of sitting around doing thinky thoughts all day. They have other jobs. But I see it in the areas that I support all the time. And this just because that's where my focus is. I know the other researchers are helping their areas. But say for instance, release management, when they have a question around like, what are the release managers, what do they need to do their job better? That's a little bit more of a strategic question than a tactical one, but it comes out as tactical decisions that were made to add features to the product, support the release managers in these ways. Hayana changed her designs the more she talked to people. Jackie, the PM, changed her direction the more she talked to people. So it's embedding the research in that product process and that design process to get more confidence over time for your decisions, to say, I've talked to 5 people. This is pretty consistent. We really should go in this direction. I've got feedback from a usability test in my design from 5 to 6 people. They have problems with this button. I've got to redesign this button. I've got to fix it. And then I'm going to go show it to another 5 people. So it's infusing that research into that product development flow as frequently as you can when you have questions you need to get answers to from somebody other than yourself. That's kind of the key.
I see. And obviously we at GitLab have the benefit with these tight iteration cycles. We also have the opportunity to capture some feedback from customers and get some good qualitative feedback. And I'm wondering how can we effectively leverage the insight that we get from research, and how can we effectively leverage the feedback that we get from customers and use that again to help in our product development lifecycle?
Yeah, from what I've seen is the key with that is that the product partners, which I call engineering, design, research, and product partners, they all have to partner in on those efforts. So it's not something that has to be shared or should be shared later. This is something that everybody's aware of. Everybody knows that somebody's going and doing research for this thing, and they know that what their part of that thing is, whether it's a design phase where engineering wants to put their thoughts into, like, can we do this or can we not do this, or maybe we need to go research something so we can support this. um, Everybody knows what's going on. So if Hyana goes off and runs some sessions for release management design, they know why she's doing it, they know what she's hoping to get out of it, and when she comes back and tells them what she's learned, they understand how they can consume that information for their departments. I've also seen people leverage issues to pull customer feedback that way as well. So it doesn't always have to be like a talkie session with somebody. You can like actually pose a question in an issue to say, what do you guys think? How is this feature working for you, especially if it's something that's been out for a little while and been something somebody's either asked for or complained about. Those are the ones that you're always going to get some good feedback on.
Nice. Some of the best ideas for features and stuff that I've had in designs in previous companies has been from the developers who've sat in on some testing sessions. So
Yes.
it's always nice if you can even include them in as
Oh
shadows or
yeah.
leading the sessions. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd love to have development there because they always have such a different perspective than I have, and different from my PM or my designer as well. And it's a skill I don't have. I don't code, so why am I leaving you out of it? If you're actually going to have to build the thing that we're testing, you should definitely be there to help guide that feature.
Yeah, agreed. So you mentioned before that sometimes you see iteration and research sometimes at odds with each other. And I'm wondering, what are some of the challenges that you've seen at GitLab when it comes to research and iteration?
One of the big challenges is the idea of small iterations. Just put it out there, we'll fix it later. That kind of goes against research's I know it's like clutching my pearls, goes against research's tenet of like, no, we have to at least ask somebody something first before we put it out there. And so I feel like that can be misinterpreted sometimes and used as a shield to say we just have to move faster. I don't know necessarily if we always have to move as fast as some people believe in their heart that we should move at, because we often sacrifice the customer experience to move that fast. If it's a feature that's not executed well, no one's going to use it. Might as well just take a little extra week or two to get some feedback on it, fine tune it, and then push it out. I don't believe that research has to take another 2 or 3 months into, slap that onto a product cycle. It can be quicker than that, especially if you've got customers you already know. Like, get them in front of it, get them to give some unbiased feedback about the thing that they're looking at, and you have more confidence in the feature. But that's the big one that I've hit here, of like, just make small iterations and push it out. And I think it works really well for developers, because you can tweak the code in small amounts and push it out as long as you don't break anything. But when it comes to design and research and even product management, sometimes you really have to have a little bit longer cycle, so you have a complete thought, a complete thing that you're putting out there. And I mean, I've seen it. Our customers know when it's BS. They know when it's been pushed out too fast. And while they too code, they understand, they don't want their tool to work like that. They want their tool to support them in what they're trying to do, and they want to have confidence in their tools. So we really have to think some of those quick decisions, like quick, let's get it out there decisions through.
So I suppose what sort of advice would you give to teams who are find themselves in that position of uncertainty and trying to figure out what's the right thing to do?
Yeah, so what I usually tell people is if you can answer if you tell me I have to build this thing, and I ask you, how do you know that? And your answer consists of more than just, I just know that we have to do it. Your answer says, customers have told me. I can point to you to this issue. I can point to you to this information in Chorus or these other places where I've talked to customers. They've told me to build this thing. That tells me you do have confidence outside of yourself. While we do use our tool, this is another hard part here at GitLab. Like, we are users of GitLab all the time. We are still not our target users. I am not a developer. I am not a target user. I'm closer to the non-developer person who's struggling to use GitLab to do things than I'm to the coder who's using it every day, day in, day out, and understands like all the finer points of the product. I would never say that I'm the user if I'm trying to design something or research something for that coder, developer, system admin persona. But a lot of the times I'll run into people, and I shouldn't say a lot, it's getting rarer and rarer. I'll run into people who just believe like they are the user, like they know how to use this feature, they know that this is a problem. Unless you have some corroborating evidence from the outside world, you can't just say we have to fix this. Like, you have to bring something else to me, competitive analysis even, that'll work. Something from the outside world that tells me that you are having confidence around your decision that's not just coming from the internal world of you.
Agreed. And to add to that, you are not your user point. There's also the curse of knowledge, where if you know something, you can't unknow that, and therefore put yourself into a position of empathy of someone else who may not know it. So as people who develop for GitLab and use GitLab a lot ourselves, we have this curse of knowledge in so many areas of the product that other people may not be aware of. And that also has a big way of shaping what we design and our assumptions.
I've seen it too. I've seen that, we assume a lot. And even from my newbie self of trying to do like a merge request, like, what am I doing? Where am I at? Why am I even looking at this screen? Did I do something wrong? Like, all of these questions went in my thought process of trying to do like a change to the handbook page. Like, it's not that hard of a thing that I was trying to do, but our system really assumes a lot. And as part of this CI adoption phase, I'm going to be very interested in learning from people who don't do CI how it is to do it with our system. And do we support newbies doing that process in our system? Because I think we made a lot of leaps in assumptions of who it is that would use our systems versus the people who might benefit from it and might not ever know that it's something that they could use, or might be intimidated with the way that it's laid out and the way that it's presented.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose another question I have for you is what advice would you give a new researcher coming into GitLab around iteration, or someone who's thinking about joining GitLab?
Yeah. So I would say that the value of iteration here is something that is more practiced than I have seen it anywhere else. Like, I've been at other companies where they're like, we'll be agile. And we'll just make small changes and push them out and we'll be fine. And we'll just keep going. Well, small changes turned into maybe one thing a quarter. So definitely here, we definitely practice it a lot. And I think, so forewarned, is forearmed. So know that we do practice it. But the other piece of that advice, I would want to tell them, if they're a senior level person, they would get this a lot quicker than maybe a junior or a mid-level researcher would. But to defend the sacredness of research in that value of iteration, not to say you cannot do this because you have to have all this process with research, but to understand that you have to strike a balance between the need to iterate and the need for confidence in that iteration. And a lot of my conversations that I have with designers and product managers they're not fights, they're conversations around what do you need to know, when do you need to know it, here are your options of how to get answers in that timeline that you just gave me. Now, is any of that flexible? Because then we can talk about other options that we might have. And so that would be my advice to those junior mid-level people, is have a conversation with your partners, your business partners, and help them to understand what research needs to have confidence in the results. And you two work to understand what they need to do within this value of iteration as well, because it's not necessarily something that should always be at odds. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, it is something that can work together. But if you've never experienced that working togetherness of iteration and research, you come in thinking that it can't be done. And those people won't last here. Both product design and research, they just won't last if that's how you approach it.
Yeah, agree. And I think that's also where our practice of minimum viable change comes in. Viable is the key word, because just making something small doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be providing value, and that applies to research as well. So sometimes something slightly bigger is the viable option, and it takes a little bit of wisdom to discern whether or not we should get what is viable in this particular context.
Exactly.
Nice. So this has been a great chat. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to leave us with at all?
I will say, like this, and I've told people this, anybody who asks me, I have never worked with so many good people at a job before in so many different roles throughout, like all of my business partners, my design partners, my engineering partners. They're all on point. Like they all get why they're here. They understand their job and they're good at it. And they're ready to partner with other people to get whatever it is done. And I just think it's very unique. It's I worked at more than one place, and it's not something you find everywhere. And I'm just so pleased to be able to work with people like that, which is why, while I didn't like working on the weekend, I didn't mind it as much as I may have somewhere else, because I didn't feel like it was just me carrying the burden. We all share the burden here, and it's just amazing.
Nice. Really appreciate it. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, you too, Nick. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.